All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and kick off this video with some flight footage. I think that's what most people are interested in, is the quality of the video compared to DJI. And I'll just save you guys a bunch of time. If you're mostly just interested in the video quality and how it looks, the DJI image definitely looks better than the Fatshark Byte image. However, if you're interested in some of the other aspects of the Byte system, for example, the ability to connect the HDMI out to any type of goggles or screen that has HDMI in, you probably want to watch this video. Also, if you're looking at things like purely from a race perspective, in terms of like the lowest possible latency, the Byte system does beat the DJI system in terms of pure latency, in terms of pure numbers. But the difference is like, 15 milliseconds on average compared to 25 milliseconds. So for the 5% of you that can tell the difference between 25 milliseconds latency and 15 milliseconds latency, then maybe the Byte system is going to be one you're going to want to check out. Anyway, a lot of details in this video, so it's pretty long. I'll put some chapter markers down in the description if you want to skip ahead to other sections. And then I'll have some additional flight footage at the, well, not the end of the video, but in the description of the video, you have links to those, as well as download links to the sample video file from the DVR. And I'll have like a full battery of test videos later. So yeah, that's because this video is going to be way too long otherwise. So let's just get right into the review. All right, guys. So in this video, we're taking a look at the new Fatshark Byte system. I have not experienced the previous version, the Byte Frost system, at all. And the only other digital system I've used is the DJI system. And I picked this up from Get FPV on their, I guess they had a special at the very first batch that was released. This was $249, and it comes with everything here that you see. There might be other bundles in the future that may be a little bit different from this one. And I also know that there's a whoop size 25mm by 25mm single board VTX that I don't have yet. That's a prototype I've seen, and that I will probably try and get as well in the future. So that might be in a different kind of bundle. But what you get here, what you're going to see in this video was $249, but the prices may change in the future. I did buy this with my own money, and I do want to thank my patrons for providing support for this channel so that I can acquire hot products like this and give the rest of you guys a look at this before everyone else. So hopefully you guys can make a good decision as to whether or not you'd want to get this, stick with analog, or maybe go to DJI. So, I'm not going to really get into the politics of what's better, in terms of this or that, or, it really depends on kind of like what kind of pilot you are and what your needs are. So I'm going to explain what the system is, and you guys can decide for yourself if it's something that you're going to want to switch to. So first off, we'll start off with the stuff here on the left. And this came in the larger box here. This was, I think, basically the receiver unit and DVR. So there's two patch antennas here. This is basically a diversity receiver system. Two patch antennas in the front that are built in, and you have two SMA antenna connectors here. No additional antennas are included with the receiver unit or with the VTX. We'll get to that here in a second. So this is what the unit looks like. You get a fan, two antennas here, two patch antennas, a little jog dial button, probably for controlling the menu. On the bottom here, you have a little, looks like a controller board wire. I think that's what this is for, maybe for firmware updates. Not exactly sure. There was no manual provided with any of this stuff, and no links to where to download the manual that I could find in the box, which was kind of strange. There's this one little card here, I'll explain, that came with the VTX. You have a mini HDMI out. From here you can connect to your Fatshark goggles or to pretty much anything that has HDMI in. And then you have a micro SD card slot for recording the video. It is 720p video, I believe. I don't know exactly what the bitrate is. You have power in here for your barrel plug. That's 2 to 6S, I believe. And you have these additional cables here. So this is a XT60 power cable adapter, and this one has two leads. One goes to your goggles and one goes to the receiver DVR unit. If If you want to use that, then there's also this one here, which goes to a 2S balance plug to a barrel plug. So a couple different options to power these components. You get the mini HDMI to mini HDMI cable. They are right angled. And this is mainly for attaching to some sort of a goggle or a screen. You get this fan shroud replacement for Fatshark goggles. And that's for connecting to the top here. And that will go to the front of the goggles. Now, you may be able to attach this to other ones. I'm going to probably have to attach this to my Yashin EV300Os because I can't get a good image on my HDO2s. It's just too blurry. So it's not flat, but you can see it's fairly flat, a little bit curved here. So it ought to fit on the EV300O, something similar. Probably just use some like double-sided tape or VH3 or something like that. But if you have Fatshark goggles, you just replace the fan shroud, and then you have these screw attachments here, and that will attach to the front of your goggles. So there is this cable here, which I think goes here for one side, and then the other side goes to the VTX unit here. But I don't know which end goes where. There's no documentation, but that's pretty sure that's what this is for. Probably for firmware updates, I'm imagining. That we'll have to see if I figure out where the manual is. If I do that, I'll let you know. There is a joystick cable camera control board here, basically. And this is for attaching to the VTX. This came in the box with the receiver, strangely enough, not the VTX. And this would go to over here. I think it goes in like so. And that's for changing the settings. You can change the settings via the transmitter as well if you have the UART properly hooked up on your flight controller. So let's go over the stuff that came with the VTX. The VTX came in this box, smaller box here. You get 4 wires. You have power, ground, RX, and TX for the UART. And that's going to be right here. So you have voltage and ground on this side. This is the VTX board. And on the other side here, you have your UART control, the TX, and the RX. So the RX will go to the TX UART on your flight controller, and the TX will go to the RX on the flight controller. So the VTX unit has 2 boards here connected via these 4 pins here and here. I think that's used for communication. It's a 20 by 20 mounting, but as you can see, both boards overhang that on this side here where the antenna plugs in here. This is the MMCX antenna port. No antenna was included. With this, there's a photo of a true RC antenna, MMCX antenna, and the Get FPV website. That was not included in the box here. So you have to provide your own antenna. So obviously, whatever the cost is, $249 or whatever it is later, you do have to account for the cost of the antennas that is not included, besides the built-in patch antennas on the receivers. So bear that in mind. So there was this card here in the box for the VTX. It does explain about the VTX board being, the RF board being on top. And that's probably because this RF board is probably producing a lot of heat. It is a 25, 200, and 500 milliwatts power switchable for this one. But yeah, it's probably going to produce a lot of heat. So you want this one on top. You don't want this flipped over where the heat is going to be going up, and then this board's going to be blocking that. And then it does explain that it wants at least 10 millimeters of space between this and your top plate for air to flow through. So try and provide as much airflow as possible. And then they also show here as well another picture of the RF board and being at least 10 millimeters away from the carbon plate. So the chipset that's on here that's doing the digital processing of the video image is, I think, a different process than the DGS. Like I think it's like 100. I forget it's the chips, basically the chip lithography. It's what it's called. It's what's the size of the actual chips inside is a lot larger than the ones on the DJI system. So this produces a lot more heat at 500 milliwatts versus the DJI system. So we'll have to see how hot it gets. I'll measure that later. But yeah, just hang over a little bit here. You see on the side. 20 by 20 holes. I think they're probably like M2.5. I haven't actually taken the standoffs off. But yeah, you could probably remove the screws and the standoffs and go all the way through if you want. But you're going to probably need some other replacement standoffs here to keep that space between the boards. Okay, so the stuff that came with the camera, get the camera itself. This is basically based off of the Runcam Racer 4 Nano, similar to the Foxy Predator. You can see it's got the digital interface, M8 lens. I think it's 1.7 millimeter. You get a 14 millimeter to micro adapters. This is a 19 millimeter adapter. You get some mounting screws, and then you get the cable here that goes from the back of the camera here, and this goes to the VTX board. It looks like the connector, yeah, it's right there. It's on the what they call the BB board, and this is the RF board, so it's on this board here. So it goes like that. So this one is 80 millimeters is the maximum length. So if you need more length from your camera to wherever you're mounting the VTX, you probably want to get the 120 millimeter or 12 centimeter cable instead. That's a separate purchase. Okay, so one more thing to note is that this is a transmit system only. So the side over here that is the VTX or the receiver is receive only. So unlike the DJI system where on the goggle side it can transmit and receive and request retransmissions, basically the system is receive only. So it works very similar to the way analog works. You can have, I think the 8 channels that this is on is similar to the race band channels, but the numbers don't correspond exactly. And other people that have this receiver can tune into the other channels for video transmission, just like you do on analog. There's no audience mode, and so anyone that tunes in will get the exact same video feed that the pilot gets. So that's the one major difference between this one and the DJI system. And the other big difference is that the VTX unit here is only for video. It's not for control. So there's no Fatshark transmitter out there like there's a DJI transmitter, where you can actually use the air unit, like the Vista air unit or the DJI air unit, as a control receiver as well. So like in the DJI system, video and control are sent over the same signal. There's none of that here. You will need to install your own separate receiver on the flight controller that is completely separate from the system. This is for video only. Okay, so I'm going to get this all hooked up, and I'm going to actually hook this up to an external FPV monitor here that has a mini HDMI in. So you can use any kind of HDMI in unit, goggle, or screen, which is kind of nice, which is different from DJI. So I'm going to hook this up to here. We'll look at the, we'll set this up here and look at the settings, maybe change a few things. Like one of the things that you have to change is changes from 50 hertz to 60 hertz if you're in North America or the US. So we'll have to do that. It comes in 50 hertz from the factory. I think future batches will be in 60 hertz, so it shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, we'll hook this up here and we'll take a look at the settings, and then we're going to do some testing a little bit later in the video. Alright, so I got the Byte VTX installed here, and this is a crocodile baby frame. Custom build. I was going to do this as an analog build, but I'm just going to use the Byte in this one here. I do have the Bind and Fly Vista version. We're going to be reviewing that a little bit later, but that's not the focus of this video. You can see here the Byte VTX fits right here nicely. We're the same spot that the Vista unit would go. It's similar in dimensions, and a 20 by 20 mounting pattern works out just fine. I'm using 2 extra M2 standoffs here and remove those screws and put them up top there to create a little space for heat dissipation. I do have the controller joystick connected right now. You can see it's on a plug. It's pretty easy to plug in and remove. You're going to use this to change your camera settings and control the VTX as well. And you can see here's the Runcam Racer 4 Nano camera. Now this cable here is an 8 cm cable. So for some builds, you may need to get the 12 cm cable, the longer one, if the distance between the camera and the VTX is further than usual. But in this frame, it's totally fine. The connector on the back of the camera and also on the this board here is not really secured all that well. It could pop off in a crash, but it is on there fairly decently and requires a little bit of pressure to connect. I don't expect it to pop off, but there's nothing actually securing it other than the tension of the connectors. So that may be something that they want to possibly improve in the future. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in the receiver into this monitor, and we'll take a look at the settings and everything. And you can see here it does a quick scan at the beginning. It doesn't show an image because I don't have the VTX turned on. Now you can see that the resolution of the screen isn't as optimal. This is an 800 by 480 resolution screen, even though it does have HDMI in. So you may want to use a different monitor if you're going to be using some sort of FPV monitor to fly through. A lot of the goggles are going to have a 1280 by 720 resolution screen, so it'll look sharper. I'll show you that here a little bit later. Go ahead and plug this in, and it ought to automatically connect. There we go. And you can see the image here. It's a 720p image coming from the video transmitter. I think I'll look at the settings here. So to change your settings on the receiver, you can use this jog dial here. You can push it to the left and right, and also push it down. And to bring up the main menu, you're going to, so this is with the patch stance pointing away from you, you're going to long press it to the left, and that'll bring up the setup menu. And again, you can see here that the resolution of the screen isn't the greatest. Shows you can scan for other video transmitters, because this is basically like an analog, similar to an analog receiver. You can actually have I think up to 8 pilots, and you can actually tune in to other pilots and get the exact same feed that they're getting, because it's just a standard, basically just a receiver, and it doesn't use the transmit and receive setup that the DJI system uses. So here we can adjust the frame rate, format the SD card. The format of the HDMI is set to 4.3. You can change that to 16.9. So you can see there. And basically, when it goes from 4.3 to 16.9, you get the extra stuff on the side. So it's kind of squeezed here. So it depends on what your goggle resolution or goggle aspect ratio is set up as. You may want to go with 4.3 and just cut off the sides. If you go with 4.3, then the recorded video file is going to be a 960 by 720 instead of a 1280 by 720 resolution. So it kind of depends on what you want to use in terms of what you see in the goggle feed versus how you want to get the recording. So you can go back and forth there. So I'm going to leave it on 4.3. Press the button, go back to 4.3, and you can see how that the center is wider and basically the sides get cut off. If you want to go into the playback menu, it's like basically a DVR playback. And you can see all the little test files I have on here. So when the way this is set up is it will auto record when it's powered on, and then it will stop recording when you go into the setup menu, and then when you exit the setup menu, it'll start auto recording again. However, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here. There's no indicator on the screen anywhere if it's recording or not. So you can only assume that it is, and I think for the most part it is recording, just that there's no indicator on the screen that it's recording or not. So if you want to change the channel that this is receiving from, you just short press to the right on the jog wheel, and that will go to the next channel. So now we're on channel 2. So I'll go to, let's keep doing this. Go to channel 8. And then on the controller board here, you can see there's a little number here, and this button can change channels here by just short pressing the button. So I'm going to go to channel 8, and now you can see we have a signal. So I'm assuming that if we have multiple pilots on the same channel, they're probably going to be stomping on each other. I don't know how that actually works because I don't have multiple Byte systems. So I'm also assuming that if you're on the same frequency as someone that's on analog, you're probably going to mess up their video. So you want to take a look at those channel settings in the manual to make sure you're not stomping on someone else's channel. Now to change like the power settings, you're going to long press for 3 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, you see a P, and you go, there's power level 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is 25 milliwatts, 2 is 200 milliwatts, and 3 is 500 milliwatts. I'll go back to power level 1, which is 25 milliwatts. I don't want this to overheat and burn up. It does get very hot even on 25 milliwatts. And then you have to wait for the light to go off. I think it's 15 seconds. And then you can go and then you can change additional settings. If you long press this for 10 seconds, it will go bring up the low power menu. It'll flash an L, and you'll get an O or an F. There you go. So O is on, F is off. So on means basically it'll be 25 milliwatts if when it's disarmed, and then off or full power is it'll be whatever power setting you have all the time. So you will just use the low power setting and turn it on so that when you're just sitting here on the bench, it'll be 25 milliwatts when you're not armed. Alright, so to get into the camera settings, you're going to use the joystick here. This is a 5-position stick, up, down, left, and right, and also the center button. I'll bring up the camera menu, so you just short press. I'll bring up the camera menu here. So you can see here, this is outputting in 4:3 mode, so the sides of the image are cut off. So I'm going to actually, let's go ahead and fix that here. Go into the setup menu here, and change that to 16:9, and we'll exit. So now you can see that it's not cut off here. So if you want to see the full camera menu, you have to be in 16:9 mode on the receiver. So you can go in here and you can adjust your settings. I think I did change the sharpness a little bit. I think the default 63, so I'll probably switch that back for the stock recordings. It's a bit soft on the default, but you can easily adjust the sharpness and all these settings here, which is nice. Go ahead and exit out of here. We can adjust the white balance, day and night. This is exactly the same menu as it's on the analog camera, and so it's nice that you can change all the settings. If you want to change additional settings here, you want to long press the up button on this joystick. It brings up another menu. You can change your different scenes here, personal, light tracks, outdoor, quick settings basically. Leaving a personal sharp view on or off. Basically it increases sharpness. I like to leave that off. Widescreen mode, off or on. You see that when it's on, you get a little bit of extra side real estate. The vertical field of view stays exactly the same. And then the system setting here is defaulted to 50 frames per second. You probably want to change that to 60 frames per second for all the recordings. Just the extra frame rate's better. And that's pretty much it for the camera settings. And you can actually access all of these settings via the transmitter as well. Alright, so to bring up the camera menu with the transmitter, you have to have the throttle to halfway up and yaw to the right. And also you have to disconnect the joystick that was plugged into that port, otherwise this menu won't come up. So go ahead and hit that to the right and you can see the menu shows up, and then you use the right stick to navigate up and down, and then to select you yaw to the right. That'll get rid of the menu. Okay, so to bring up the VTX menu, you're going to bring both sticks down and inside. And you can see here, this is the VTX menu. Again, to navigate, use the right stick. Actually, the throttle needs to be centered, so you can change your VTX settings and also your PIDs. So go into the VTX menu here, you can change your channel using the right stick, navigate up and down, and change your power here. So 200 milliwatts, 500 milliwatts, back to 25 milliwatts, and have the low power mode on. Had all the same settings I had just changed previously. Now you can see that I have some OSD elements here. In the manual, it does show some of the ones that are available to you. It's not the full set. Also, you, obviously, for all this stuff to work with the transmitter, the OSD, and everything like that, you do have to have the UART's correctly set up, also wired properly. A lot of times if you have the UART wired up backwards, which a lot of people do by mistake, then none of this stuff will work. This is basically the same situation you have with DJI. Works pretty much the same. Okay, so I just want to show you quickly what this looks like in terms of the screen resolution on some other goggles. This is a Top Sky F7X, pretty old and not that great, but it has a HDMI in and a 1280 by 720 screen, as you can see here. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. You know, I mean, there's a 720p screen, 16 by 9, so the form and everything fits pretty nicely here. And I've got these new Sky Zone, the 04X goggles, and this has a 4:3 screen. Let's see what this looks like. So you can see that the aspect ratio is a little squished because it's outputting in 16:9 mode. But you can see it's a pretty nice picture in 720p mode here. Just to give you an idea of what it would look like. So every goggle is going to be a little bit different. Every goggle is going to have a different kind of screen and resolution, so the quality of the image you're going to get is very goggle screen dependent, so keep that in mind. And of course, this receiver module can't work with other goggles, as you can see here. I think I'll just use some like double-sided foam tape or something like that to stick to the front of these goggles. But you can see it'll work. You can probably get it to work. It's not that big of a deal. You could probably someone will probably create a 3D printed fan shroud that'll work with this as well at some point in the future. But I'm just going to use some sticky foam tape to hold the module on the front of this goggle here, and it ought to work just fine. And again, so it's just going to depend on the shape of your goggle. Some of the other ones might not work, but a lot of the ones that are shaped similarly to Fatsharks are going to probably work just fine.